It is in the lobby. Please help yourself. But I don't think you're going to need caffeine tonight because we have a great event planned for you. We want to welcome you to the 2016 5th District Congressional Debate. I am Christine Kennedy, Chief Operating Officer at the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance. On behalf of our organization and the Appomattox Chamber, who you'll be hearing from in just a moment, thank you for coming out on a Monday night for what is important to our business community and the citizens of our region. Our mission is simple and contains 4 pillars. We exist to lead regional economic development through generating jobs and investment, promoting our brand and image globally, cultivating talent, and enhancing the business climate. On behalf of our organization, we are pleased to host this event tonight with the Appomattox Chamber and our media partner, ABC 13 WSET. We extend our appreciation to our legislative series sponsors, and they are Appalachian Power, BB&T, Liberty University, the News in Advance, and supporting sponsor Southside Electric Cooperative. It is now my pleasure to introduce John Redding, the president of the Appomattox County Chamber of Commerce, to welcome the group. John?
Thank you, Christine. It is my distinct pleasure this evening to welcome each of you here on behalf of the Appomattox County Chamber of Commerce and the community of Appomattox on the whole. If you're not from Appomattox, we hope that this is not your first time here, or if it is, you'll come back and see us. I think Christine thanked everybody I had on my list, so my speech is quite short. But I would like to interject one personal comment. I find in too many elections lately I've been voting against one candidate instead of for one candidate. And I'm hoping this race will turn out that I think which side of the aisle you're on, this will be a good choice and you'll have somebody to vote for in this election. So without further ado, I'll turn it back to Christine. Thank you.
Tonight's debate will be moderated by Mark Spain from ABC 13 WSET. Our panelists tonight are members of the business community from this entire region. I will go ahead and introduce them. We have Karen Simonton. She's the Chief Administrative Officer with Ortho Virginia. Karen, please wave. In the middle is Jim Richards, partner with Petty, Livingston, Dawson & Richards, and Chair-elect of the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance. And to my far right is Stephanie Crockety. She is with Successful Innovations, which is an education company in Central Virginia. Stephanie, thank you for being here. At this time, Mark, at this time, I'm going to turn the debate over to you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
That's good. It's pretty good. And you didn't even have to have coffee. So let me tell you about tonight's event and the format. We will begin with a 2-minute opening by each candidate. Then each panelist will direct a question to both candidates. Candidates will have 90 seconds to answer that question, and then each candidate may give a 45-second rebuttal after both have answered the question. We thank you for attending tonight's debate and respectfully request that the audience not interrupt either of the candidates. Members of the audience who do not follow these guidelines will be removed. However, I'm certain that this will not be necessary and simply ask the audience to accord today's participants with appropriate respect by listening carefully, and if it is your inclination, to respond with polite applause. Audience members, you have also received a card to write your business-related question on, and if time permits, we will entertain as many of those as we can. Earlier, we drew numbers to determine who will begin today's debate and who starts the questions. Tom Garrett drew number 1 and will speak first. Thank you, Tom. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. I want to start out by saying thanks to you and the WSET for providing what I would consider to be a pretty important community service. It's really, I think, imperative in this nation that we inform ourselves as an electorate, and it's great to see so many folks here and to see this coverage. I want to thank the Lynchburg Chamber and the Appomattox Chamber, and it's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here in the audience today. I'm Tom Garrett, a member of the Virginia Senate. I represent Appomattox in the Virginia Senate, and so a lot of folks here who I know and I've worked with. was raised on a farm. My dad was a realtor and my mom was secretary here in Central Virginia, about, 20 minutes from the lawn at UVA in Boswell's Tavern. Paid for my college with an Army ROTC scholarship and had the incredible honor to serve leading American soldiers abroad during Operations Joint Guard and Joint Endeavor in the Balkans. There I saw the face of evil, and I understand some of the challenges that our nation faces today because of that service. I served after the military. I went to law school, served as a federal prosecutor, served as a state prosecutor, was elected to my county Category 1 crime rate in half in 1 year through my work with the men and women in law enforcement, and I was honored to do that, and once again saw that evil is very real and that the challenges that we face as a community aren't simply addressed by more spending and pretending that problems don't exist that do. Served as a small business startup on 3 different businesses, recently sold one. I'm a member of the Virginia State Senate, and there I've worked to create jobs. Worked on job training, worked on ensuring that our community colleges work with employers inside of our area to understand what their needs are. I've never answered a question before in my life with someone touching my left pocket. Props to the tech guy. No, I've done it now. And in fact, helped create jobs here in Appomattox when Murphy Oil had an agreement with the town that was to expire on a Friday. Got that done, and that created almost 24 jobs right here in Appomattox. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will hear from Jane.
Thank you, and good evening. I am running to be your first Congresswoman from the 5th District of Virginia. When I move around the district, when I've been here in Appomattox, people that I see say, Jane, what are the 3 things you would want us to tell other people about you? And this is what I say. First of all, I want you to tell people that I have a 35-year robust record of creating jobs in the region that I come from here in the district. I took an economics degree from the University of Virginia. I have a certification in economic development from Virginia Tech. I owned successful small businesses where I grew jobs. I served as president of my own regional chamber of commerce for almost a decade. And I wrote the plan that launched our own regional economic development partnership that is now celebrating its 20th year. In those 35 years, we have absolutely added tens of thousands of jobs in my region of the district. And in fact, we've often had one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. Second, tell people that when I served in the local legislature as chairman of the Board of Supervisors of Albemarle County, that my signature was on bringing amazing amounts of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, to Albemarle County in the form of road maintenance, road development, opening a 50-year water supply dam, launching a regional firearms training facility for 3 police departments and surrounding sheriff's departments, and finally securing 2 grants to help begin the deployment of internet and cell service to our county in the rural area. Third, tell people that for 16 years I've served as a professional mediator, and in those years I've learned how to bring individuals and groups together to get rid of conflict and find solutions and move towards a goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates, for those opening remarks. Now it's time to begin the questions. Questions will be asked from the panelists in an order also predetermined from a random drawing held before this debate. The first question will come from Karen Simonton of Ortho, Virginia. Please direct the first question to Tom, and then Jane will answer second.
Senator Garrett, as a junior congressman, what will you do in the first 100 days?
Karen, thank you for being here and thank you for your question. I love the question because I've gotten it a lot. In fact, I fielded a question from Congressional Quarterly a month and a half ago. What are you going to do in the first 100 days? And I told them that within the first 100 days, I really hope to know where the men's room is. I'd like to know, where I can buy good coffee. Maybe the reality is we're not running for king or queen. And this is a collegial effort and a collegial body, and you need to build relationships. You need to find folks with whom you share values. You need to find folks with whom you share principles. You need to get to know those people. I have never in my life done anything great alone, and when I go to Washington, We'll accomplish great things by having gotten to know people with whom we share values, and gotten to know the people with whom we don't share all values, but we share some values. You know, as a member of the Senate, I think I voted with, I was counting the other day, something like 75 Democrats over the last 5 years. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of having worked across the aisle with Barbara Favola on ending seclusion restraint. I'm proud of rolling back SOL burdens that are over-testing our children and stymieing our creative teachers. I'm proud of being the patron of the bill that eliminated the 140 seat hour requirement in K-12 ed. I'm proud of working on workforce development across the aisle. And so what I want to do in the first 100 days, in all seriousness, is just learn who I can work with on both sides of the aisle, and learn who shares our 5th district values on both sides of the aisle. And by doing that, by building that foundation, we'll be more effective as we move along in our career.
Jane?
Ms. Dittmar, what will you do in the first 100 days?
In the first 100 days, like Tom, there's some getting used to the place. But I intend to do the following. First of all, we will have both Republicans and Democrats in the Virginia delegation at the House of Representatives, and getting to know them and understanding how we can move the Commonwealth ahead, which will help all districts, will be a #1 priority. #2, I absolutely intend to immediately develop relationships over at the Federal Communications Commission. That is where the money is to bring down infrastructure for the district to deploy internet and cell service. It'll be relationships, understanding how the grant process works, and then getting that information back out to local government and the providers so that we can get that project going. The sooner the better.
All right, thank you. The next question will come from Jim Richards of Petty, Livingston, Dawson, and Richards, and will be answered first by Jane.
Ms. Dittmar, what specifically do you have on your agenda to impact the business community? And what do you intend to do to accomplish that?
Well, I'll go back, first of all, to the deployment of critical infrastructure. We know for a fact that our rural economies in the district are being held back without internet and cell service. You can talk to a merchant at Smith Mountain Lake who will tell you that they can't process credit card payments. You can talk to agribusiness and they'll tell you they cannot expand without this critical infrastructure. You can talk to home-based businesses and small businesses all over the district. We need to do something about that. Second of all, we have to get our a handle on the regulatory environment. I think we've passed far-reaching regulation meant to cure a problem and not look at the details. And we have to go back to some of the regulations that are already passed and work on them, because that is stifling growth among small business. I'm a small business person. I eat it, breathe it, and know it. And I think that some of the things that we have to get to should be talked about immediately.
Thank you. And Senator Garrett, same question for you.
So, Jim, thank you to you for being here. The cost of regulatory compliance in the United States annually, according to the American Enterprise Institute, in your heads, guess, how about $1.9 trillion a year? That's $6,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country, just for our businesses and employers to turn on the light switch. And we have things, and I'm going to digress because I saw you nodding, like medical device taxes that have to get passed on to the end user, so we push those prices up. We're going to work on the regulatory climate. We've made it a priority from day one. It was killing jobs. That's one of the big reasons that Lane Furniture left out the Vista. That's why Burlington's not here in the 5th. We have literally seen tens of thousands of jobs regulated out of existence when there was no evidence whatsoever that the regulations that were promulgated by the executive branch were even needed. But the bureaucracy continues to expand to meet the expanding needs of the bureaucracy, and the regulators have to justify their existence. And Ms. Dittmar really hit on a good point. She said, we need to look at the passage of far-reaching regulations. Well, folks, guess what? Congress doesn't pass regulations. Congress passes laws. And so when the Democrat Party voted as a bloc against H.R. 4768 this past July, which would allow the Congress the ability to roll back EPA regs that kill jobs, that kill agriculture, that stymie individual initiative, that keep us from bringing jobs home because the cost to compete is too high, because the cost to comply is too high. We have to pass common sense regulation that restores Article 1 of the Constitution and let the legislative branch legislate.
Jane, do you have a rebuttal?
only to say that this has been going on in this country for a long time under both Democratic and Republican administrations and Democratic and Republican controlled Congresses. The issue is partly what Tom's talking about, which is the legislature is supposed to pass laws. The executive branch is only supposed to execute what the legislature does. The unfortunate thing is we are not doing that on the Hill. We're not doing that in the General Assembly. Local government knew it and complained about it to our General Assembly representatives, and we will do the same thing in Congress. It knows no party. We've just grown. It's gotten complicated. We need to stop that. I'd like to see sunset provisions put on laws so that there's a deadline where things have to be reviewed and worked on.
I mean, this is incredibly refreshing, and there's a reason I hold Ms. Dittmar in such high regard. But if you look up HR 4768, 241 Republicans voted yes and 0 Democrats. What it would have done is allow the branch that passes the laws to oversee the enactment of the laws. What happened in Chevron in 1984 was the federal government said any regulation may be promulgated by a regulatory entity so long as it legitimately advances a law passed by Congress. What happens now is the mud puddle in your driveway is a fine from the EPA, and you have to pay to mitigate the runoff if you pave the thing. And that is a party line vote, and I will go to Washington and fight to restore common sense in Article 1 of the Constitution. The legislative branch indeed should be the ones making the laws, not the regulators.
Thank you both, and thank you for keeping an eye on the time. Doing a good job there. The next question comes from Stephanie Procity of Successful Innovations and will be answered first by Tom.
Good evening. Senator Garrett, as you've been campaigning, we are sure you've been talking to leaders and constituents in the business community. What have you discerned are the biggest issues facing the business community today? And what have you discerned as being the biggest issues facing manufacturers, which is a large sector of our economy?
Sure. Okay. So manufacturing is on decline here. Everybody knows that. Stephanie, thank you for being here. I don't want to be unequal in my treatment. In fact, in Albemarle County, it's down 34% in the last, I think, 14 years. It's amazing. And there has to be something done. I have literally spoken with the employers, the job creators for probably 10 to 15,000 businesses. Andrew Griffin and I try to keep a running tally. And every single one I ask, if you could change one thing, if you were king for a day, what would you change? And every single one says the regulatory climate. So I think Jane and I are both on target on that. That's what we get from listening. We were at a millwork place in Albemarle, and they said there are 3 principals of the company who spend 5 to 7 hours each just on OSHA compliance. That's 21 hours a week. They're not out getting contracts to bring jobs to Charlottesville. And that's incredible because, candidly, the specialized laborers who work there aren't easily replaced. It's in the best interest of the job creators to keep that workforce there. The other thing that we need to do is, why are they leaving? Because the Chinese cheat. Because all too often, the people who strike trade deals in Washington, whether it's NAFTA or TPP, look to what they can do for people across the Pacific before they look to what they're going to do to people across the Potomac. And these in fact, omnibus should be struck from the lexicon in Washington. These omnibus trade packages have some good and lots of bad, and when we find out, inevitably, that the Chinese have people working in conditions that will lead to an early grave, where they're forced into what is tantamount to modern-day slavery, we turn a blind eye in the name of cheap goods. That's unacceptable. The United States needs to hold those countries to account, and we need to make sure that the deals we make are kept to.
All right, we have a wrinkle that we have to iron out, so bear with us 1 second.
Is it your mic? No?
I don't know.
I can hear you.
I sure hope y'all can hear me.
I can hear you.
If we have a bad answer, then maybe I'll say it quietly.
Oh. All right, so this is a big technical wrinkle. Okay, these are fine. So, what I'm gonna have to do is, and I hope this is okay, I'm gonna have to pass you the microphone and give it to you in order for the feed to be heard over our website. I know it'll be a little uncomfortable if you're not used to holding one of these, like me, but let's try. All right, we want to make sure you're both heard. Oh, Lord. Okay, I should have put my track shoes on. All right, I apologize. But we'll get this, okay, because this is important. So Jane, let me give you an opportunity, and then Tom for a rebuttal.
Would you repeat the question?
I'd be happy to.
Yes, please.
All right, the question was, as you have been campaigning, we are sure you've been talking to leaders and constituents in the business community. What have you discerned are the biggest issues facing the business community today? And what have you discerned as being the biggest issues facing manufacturing, which is a large sector of our economy?
Okay, thank you for repeating that. Now, this isn't broadcasting this way, so I do need to do this.
Correct.
I think I can do this. All right, so biggest issues facing the business community, particularly manufacturing. Number one, with regard to trade agreements, they shed our jobs here in this district. Southside was particularly vulnerable because they had the largest percentage of jobs in that sector. We shed jobs in our region as well. What we did, remember that economic development partnership we formed? We saw what was happening and we went out after new jobs in different sectors. As an example, myself, the city manager, the county executive, worked with John Warner when he was the senator to begin to protect our military that was there, and we were instrumental in helping the sister agency, NINJIC, move down to the Charlottesville-Albemarle area instead of losing our military installation that we had, which was the Foreign Science and Technology Center. So it's working on your sectors. You're going to have shrinking and expanding due to external forces that you can't control. But Albemarle County and our region is doing a really good job of anticipating that. It is no longer necessarily trade agreements that are hampering job creation in the manufacturing sector. Light manufacturing actually is growing, but far fewer jobs are needed. The real enemy now for the American worker are robots. And so what we need to do is do retooling and retraining for new sectors. So that's what I will be working on in terms of that piece of economic development.
Tom?
So, I mean, with all fair consideration, NINJIC's actually been in the Albemarle Charlottesville area for my entire adult lifetime.
No, it hasn't.
Okay. I was looking at Charlottesville tomorrow last week, and I saw that Albemarle County was last in Virginia amongst its peer counties in the labor participation rate. They were last in Virginia amongst their peer counties in the labor participation rate for young adults, the 18 to 24 demographic. They have the highest cost of living in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia for peer counties outside of Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, and the Virginia region. I would submit that there are more things to worry about than robots when TPP is looming, depending on who wins this election.
Should I answer that? Tom, I'm sorry about the interruption. I'm so sorry. The Foreign Science and Technology Center was what was the precursor to NINJIC, and you would have had to have been a very, very little boy if NINJIC is what you're talking about. It actually happened while I was president of the Regional Chamber of Commerce that we were able to secure that new investment when John Warner was senator. That's all I wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Thank you. This next question will come from Karen Simonton of Ortho, Virginia. And please direct the question to Jane first and then Tom.
Yes.
Ms. Dittmar, please provide some narrative around the widening gap between for-profit and not-for-profit businesses and the impact that varies in tax burden has on the communities in which they serve. How can the tax burden modify the level playing field and feed infrastructure costs in the communities in which these not-for-profits use resources?
That's a good question. Oops.
I need 3 of them.
Generally speaking, with 3 sectors, public, private, and nonprofit, I would have to say that nonprofits create an incredible investment in a community. But as you point out, often they don't pay property tax and other things. What we did in our region was we asked the largest nonprofit who was not paying real estate tax and other taxes, the University of Virginia, to form a foundation where they would, except for academic issues, would have to pay those taxes, and we negotiated that out. So it's something you can negotiate between the sectors, I think.
Thank you. Jane, I forgive you for interrupting. I promise not to interrupt you. It gets hot, it gets heated, so I get it. It's okay. I want to go back to that Charlottesville Tomorrow story, which I would commend you all to Google search, came out last week. And the economic development director in Albemarle County talked about how there was an egregious imbalance in that area where Jane was recently the chair of the board, that the vast bulk of their biggest employers were private sector, not-for-profit, that it was unhealthy and dangerous, and that they needed to really diversify their economy, or those last place numbers in labor participation, young people's labor participation, cost of living would continue to go up. Ultimately, you know, the University of Virginia is an incredible world-class institution. We're delighted to have it here in the 5th District. But the University of Virginia is a net consumer of tax dollars, not a net contributor, at least on the front end. I would argue that the young people that the university educates are, in the long term, great contributors. And so you need to have that private sector business, that individual initiative. You need to have people willing to take a chance in a climate that encourages that, and not one that punishes success. We talked about Social Security in another debate, and I believe our opponent talked about a means test where if you earn more than a certain amount, you wouldn't get Social Security benefits. Geez, you just disincentivized people from creating more wealth and thus creating more jobs. It's a horribly unfair thing to do, and it also stymies the initiative of an individual to work harder, to earn more, and to invest more in their business and create more jobs. So you got to know that ultimately to drive an economy, you can't do it with government and nonprofit entities alone. You need private risk takers, and you need to encourage them.
So universities like the University of Virginia, Longwood University, even colleges like Hampton City College, but if you look at Liberty University, Everett in our south, are amazing economic generators. We use that asset to spin off technology, to start that new eco-economy, and we have 98 new biotechnical firms now because of that. When I was on the Board of Supervisors, and always when I was president of the chamber, we are always looking at our sectors, making sure we balance and rebalance. So I think that's an important thing for me to help with in terms of evaluating throughout the district when I'm your Congresswoman.
Yeah, look, I mean, again, I hold the University of Virginia in high regard, and Longwood and Hampton City and Liberty as well. We have 90 new biotechnology firms because at least 98 new biotechnology firms because at least 98 women and men decided to work hard and invest the fruits of their labor in an emerging field and create jobs. Right? It's as simple as that. The University of Virginia didn't start 98 new companies. 98 individuals or groups of individuals started those companies through their own initiative. And we need to understand that wealth is generated not by the government, but by the people of the state. The fundamental difference, I think, is a reliance on the state versus a belief in the individual. And I believe that people in the 5th District are dynamic, and if we set the conditions for success, then by gosh, we're going to succeed.
Will come from Jim Richards of Petty, Livingston, Dawson, and Richards, and first answered by Tom.
Thank you. You both touched on this in your answers to my first question, but I think what we want to do is dig a little deeper because this issue is so critical to businesses here, and I'm going to read it the way I wrote it. The Code of Federal Regulations contains over 1 million regulatory restrictions. It's written on 175,000 pages across 238 volumes. It covers over 20 linear feet of shelf space. I know this, I know. It is a ponderous chain that weighs on the productivity of our businesses. Do you have an agenda of specific areas of regulation you would work to roll back?
I was listening intently and
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I promised the audience that's not a planning question. It's something we've been talking about since the very beginning. It stymies initiative, it destroys jobs. Let me talk about Lane Furniture again real quickly. It wasn't that American workers were being paid too much. They were being paid well enough to send kids to college and support families. But when OSHA and the EPA said you can't do this where you do that, you can't have this chemical where you have that chemical, and we started shipping component parts to Canada and Mexico, the cost became too much, then we shipped the jobs away. So the RAINS Act is something that I would jump on as quickly as I had the opportunity. I also talked about HR 4768, SOPRA, Separation of Powers Restoration Act. It would give the legislative branch the authority to tell the regulatory entities, yes, that's not what we intended. I'm going to vote for a clean Chesapeake Bay. But it shouldn't mean that someone is penalized for a mud puddle. It shouldn't mean that every time you want to build a house, you have to build an abatement runoff pond. It shouldn't take individual property rights by creating circumstances where the property is worth less than its value by virtue of meeting with regulations, which is where we got to here in Virginia until I was the first and only voice for 1 year to fight against dam safety regulations that were onerous and absolutely without any basis in reality. And so this is a passion of mine. We worked on it at the state level, helped roll back the regulation that said you had to have a state certificate to braid hair for money. Please, can we encourage people to work and take initiative and do something of value for their communities without the state and the federal government getting in the way?
We are drowning in regulation. It is suffocating the ability for people to start small businesses and for small businesses to grow. My focus will be on the types of businesses that thrive here and can thrive here in the 5th District. We are really a country of small businesses. I'm going to look at some of the acts that have been passed over the last decade where they have a one-size-fits-all approach to regulation and look at how we can give relief to our small business communities, both those starting and those that will come in the future. Also, there are some other things. There are 7,000 regulations governing Veterans Affairs. I'm told that Congress is at fault for that. The tax code is, we could do a whole evening on the tax code. That has to be simplified. We need to get back to a more simple approach so people can understand what government's doing and we can actually operate efficiently.
Again, I don't want to be disagreeable, and it's amazing to me when we talk how much common ground we find, but Congress doesn't promulgate regulations. There's 7,000 regulations over Veterans Affairs promulgated by people who no one elected, people who are accountable to no one, people who will not be fired when the administration changes, those people who have gotten to a high enough level in government that they're not an executive appointment. These are powerful people, and we don't know their names, and we can't hold them accountable, and Congress can't stop them. I want to tell you this, and this is a fact, Google search it. 2 of the largest ecological disasters, environmental